All right, up next we have a panel discussion with some Opportunity Zone fund managers. And we heard earlier today about the spirit of the law and the why of the law. And John Lettieri at the EIG talked about some of the why, and Senator Tim Scott talked about the why as well. I think now is a good opportunity to really switch to how. How does this get done? How do these benefits come into these low-income communities? And with that, we have 3 fund managers. These funds are investing in different asset classes across the country. They have different size funds, and I think we got a good perspective of what's out there in the marketplace across the country here with us on this panel. So I'll give each of you a minute or two, maybe to introduce yourselves and talk about your fund. So we'll start with Mark.
Okay. Well, I kind of told you all about myself before, but we're just focused on South Carolina, doing projects around the state. We're looking for triple bottom line returns, and we're really looking to work with communities, not come in and dictate kind of what projects are supposed to be there. So we originally started, we were targeting around $50 million in projects. Right now we probably have $300 million in projects lined up, and with more coming. So we're really just focused on the state and trying to get things done here. If I can help you with your projects, I'm happy to do so. I really kind of said in the beginning, I think there's room for everyone here. It's not just limited opportunity. I think there's almost unlimited opportunity for all of us to do projects. So,
well, I'm John Coppola from Sanctuary Opportunity Funds. We believe that for this program to be successful, it has to start at the community level. And so we have basically 3 approaches. We have our first fund, which is Charleston O Fund. That fund, obviously, it focuses on Charleston, South Carolina, and investments in those opportunity zones. I'm from there, I live there, I invest there, and I know the community, and I want to make that community, and this program prosper, for the people in those areas. So that's a very critical standpoint that we want to focus on, and being from there and focused on that particular tract, I think is very important. Secondly, we have a philanthropic opportunity fund. This fund is 100% based on social impact. We don't care about return on investment. This fund is really geared to people that would typically donate to charities where they're not sure where their donations are really going, or how those donations are being affected. Are they really getting to the people that need it? By them actually investing into our philanthropic opportunity fund, they are now able to know for sure that their dollars are, 1, coming back into the community, and 2, they actually get their money back in 10 years when we go ahead and liquidate the asset. So it's definitely a very good program where you could actually give back to the community and actually get your money back. And lastly, we have a consulting arm which basically helps developers, other high net individuals that want to be involved in an opportunity fund but really do not have the capabilities and the knowledge to setting it up and controlling it for the next 10 years. Even if you are a developer and your exit strategy is 3 years from now, you could set up that project within an opportunity fund, and then you can actually sell those interests down the road. So we work with developers in order to enable them to do that as well.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name's Quinn Palomino. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Virtua Partners. We're a global private equity firm based out of Scottsdale with offices both in California, Newport Beach, Hong Kong, as well as in Canada, in Edmonton and Atlanta. Our funds, we actually syndicate. We have a number of funds. We have about 100 projects in our opportunity zones. We focus on office buildings, multifamily, single-family rental, hospitality. Specifically in the opportunity zone space, we have focused on the Southeast, Southwest, and the Sun Belt for particular reasons. I know, Cory, we can address that later. But and Senator Scott, I've spent a lot of time with Senator Scott, and just he asked to just share I guess the how on how this is being done. I know there's a number of people here in the room who are local municipalities and states, and perhaps we could share how we've been successful, what works, and perhaps some of the feedback on the investor side of what makes these projects make sense for the investors.
Great. Thanks, guys. So, John, you mentioned the focus of your fund on the Charleston area. What has been the investor assessment of the Opportunity Zone tracts within the Charleston market?
Yeah, I think generally speaking, they're very excited about the opportunity zones in the Charleston area. There are a lot of questions like we've heard about today. Why is Upper King in an opportunity zone? I mean, there's reasons, and we can go into that at a different point. But that's a great area for investment. But there's other areas that really need the investment that are left behind. We look at that as an advantage in the sense that when you're building a multi-asset portfolio of properties and businesses, you need that diversity to offset some of the risks associated with investing in some low-income communities that are a little bit farther behind. So it's a natural way to diversify one's portfolio. When you have the good, the middle, and the bad, you can have a combination of all three, and it balances the risks. So we view that as being a good opportunity.
Right. Quinn, you mentioned some of the investment classes that Virtua Partners is investing in. Do you find there's one asset class that's better than the others, that lines up better with Opportunity Zone program?
I think, Cory, just to share our thought process on this is, at the end of the day, I think Senator Scott and John earlier from EIG shared, is the spirit is to give back. This is a subsidy being provided. So we need to ensure that the communities benefit from this. So that is at a core piece of how we look at our investments moving forward. And it helps you, I share this because it helps you see why we've gone the route we have on the particular assets we focus on. The two critical things for success for an opportunity zone is, remember, at least on the real estate side, this is a greenfield play. There are requirements in there that you need to double your basis. I know you had talked about that before. So that's new construction, or a lot of money, doubling that money that you've put into maybe, redoing an entire building. So execution is critical. Development execution, timely and on budget. And remember, we're holding this for 10 years, so the cardinal sin is you don't want to lose this property in year 5 because you've completely blown the incentive. So management is a critical piece, and being profitable in year 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, or beyond. So with those two issues, we've looked at it as, unlike other areas around the world, Australia, if you look at their economy, they've been going up for the last several decades, 20 years. Areas like China, their government actually keeps their economy up. Here in the US, historically, since post-World War II, we're cyclical. There are cyclical risks. So any investor, any community, any developer not taking into account the risk component of a development play is being foolish. And we take that very seriously. So we are in the longest expansion. So when we look at our products, we focus on hospitality, so hotels, and we focus on residential housing, multifamily, condos, single-family rentals. Because, and why, and I'll give an example of just during the last downturn, a retail property. We're a little scared of going into retail. Everyone has seen during the last 2008, during the last Great Recession, you saw buildings, it was overnight. You'd have it 100% occupied before you went to sleep, and the next morning that company, the Toys R Us or the grocery store, goes belly up and they're gone, and they're your main anchor tenant, and all those inline tenants disappear with them. So that is a huge risk. And when you look at hospitality, if run really well, and if you look at residential, it never goes to zero. And so that helps, again, it's a risk mitigation component, and that's why we focus on hospitality and residential. There is a crisis in our country right now on housing, affordable housing, and so to be able to meet that need. And in both those areas, the social impact component, again, to go back to that, is on hospitality, you're creating jobs. And on the residential housing, and we don't focus on luxury housing, and it's intentional. We do build luxury housings, but not on our Opportunity Zone projects, because we can't see there's not a large social impact for it. So we focus on entry level, affordable, and workforce housing.
Great, thank you. Mark, as you stated, your fund is focused in South Carolina market. I know you've had the opportunity though to travel the Southeast in your role. How does the South Carolina market compare to other opportunity zone markets in the Southeast?
Yeah, I think it's a mix. So I think we're certainly better than some. Our demographic trends are really strong. I mean, we have 50 people a day moving to Greenville, South Carolina. I think we have 200 or 300 people a day moving to the state. So I mean, those are great, phenomenal trends to have, especially when you're building buildings, supply and demand, right? There's other states that, I don't want to name them, but there's other states in the Southeast that aren't growing as fast as we are. So for sure, if you're an investor, I would think you'd want to invest in a state like this versus some others. And also say this, I mean, so I'll compare us to North Carolina. I think North Carolina has some great opportunities. The only issue with North Carolina is that they're not in conformity with the federal government's regulations for taxes, right? So if you invest, what that means is, for the program, it's a federal program, right? You're going to get all these benefits, what Cory described earlier, but then at the state level, they can choose to align themselves with that and do the same thing or not. And North Carolina has decided they're not going to align themselves. So you will have some tax, I don't know, you probably know what it is.
What's that?
The tax at the end of an opportunity fund if you invest in North Carolina versus South Carolina.
So you pay a state tax, right? Yeah,
right.
Which is, I don't know, 6-7%.
Okay, so you have to keep that in mind. If you're going to invest in a similar project between North and South Carolina.
Stick to the script. Just kidding.
I'm not supposed to ask him questions. I'm
right.
sorry.
I'm asking questions.
So if you invest in North Carolina or South Carolina, it's the same type of project, right? In North Carolina, the amount that you're going to make is going to be about 7% less than it would be in South Carolina. And same thing with California. California is not in alignment. In my mind, it doesn't really make sense why people would do projects there. Plus, it takes 4 years to even get a project up and running before the state will approve it. So, so I think from that standpoint, South Carolina, and I said this earlier, I think we're one of the top 5 opportunity zone states in the country right now because of conformity, because of the legislation we passed, and the legislation I think we're going to pass in the future, hopefully soon here. We're going to be in a really good position for investment.
Right. John, in talking with investors and trying to raise equity, has there been hesitation from investors because the final regulations aren't out yet and they want to sit on the sidelines and wait till those final regs are out? Or?
I mean, yeah, obviously there's been hesitation. The delay in getting the final regulations out is definitely hampered, but as Quinn states, I mean, she's doing it. So the bottom line is I think it comes more down to the centers of influence of people who go to you, when you go to your financial advisor or your accountant, and they're not up to date on what this program or what this initiative is truly able to accomplish for you in your particular situation, that's not a good thing. So we spend a lot of our time on educating CPAs that aren't as up to date as Cory and his firm. Educating everyone from financial advisors to anyone that would go to another person that they rely on advice for. I'm a registered investment advisor, in another business that I own. So we tell our clients all the time, this is an opportunity that you have to take part of. This is something when you have a capital gain in a stock, most people here are invested in stocks. Probably 90% of their assets are in stocks if they have an invested portfolio. Only a small fraction of that is in real estate. After 11 years of a bull market, and the global economy slowly creeping down and coming towards recession, if not already in recession globally, that's going to affect the United States. It's going to affect your stock portfolios. You could take advantage of that right now, liquidate some of your gains that you obviously have because we've had an 11-year bull market, and take those capital gains and invest them into this program. And as a fiduciary, as someone who has your best interest at heart when I give advice, that's what you need to do.
Thanks, John. So Quinn, Virtua Partners is a global firm, and you come to South Carolina from Arizona. You mentioned that you're focusing on the Southeast and the Sun Belt. Why those markets? Why not the larger markets of New York, DC, Chicago?
Well, it goes back to both investors, community, and I think the best way to look at this is for a successful project, there's no point in running a race if you don't get to the finish line. There's just no point. I know Senator Scott and I have talked about this quite a bit. We want to be able to get to the end of this and see the fruits of all this labor. And when you do that, it's important, how do you eliminate the risk and address all the issues that may become problems so that you don't get to the finish line. So first part of it, Cory, is your previous question is investors. And I'm going to give you, this is just how, before the opportunity zone, just so we all know here, it is a transformational legislation. There hasn't been legislation like this for decades. But like Senator Scott said, it's not the panacea. It is not the secret, like the silver bullet. It's not the cure to cancer. It is a tool. And the tool that it has provided already is it's changed everyone's language on how to invest in the community. Prior to the opportunity zone, here in the US, I would get an investor who said, Quinn, my expectation when I write you this check is I'm going to get a 15% cash-on-cash return. I should get that payment every month. And I'd like my 25 to 30% IRR, and I'd like no risk. So if you could cue that up for me, I'm on board. And that's the type of, and I know for some of you, you're thinking, well, what does that mean? It's a hefty request. In Asia, for Asian investors in the Pacific Rim, when they're investing in the US, they would always say things like, I just want Manhattan or I want San Francisco. And you tell them Greensville, and they'll be like, where is that? Is that in the US? And you pull out a map, yes, it is. And here's Phoenix, and here's Green, and there are other areas besides just Manhattan. So that language has changed. So when you look at an investment, you have to look at, there's three legs of this stool for it to be successful. It has changed the language of the investor. Many of our ultra high net worth investors and institutions, they have a very genuine heart for philanthropy. They do. And I know it's hard. Sometimes you read the New York Times, we were cited an article. Some people don't think that. They think that if there's a lot of money, somehow you don't care. I'm a first-generation Vietnamese. I was born in Saigon, came here after the war, and grew up at a refugee camp just here in Fort Chaffee, Arkansas, here in the South. So if anyone knows that this country is a country and being able to be around the world, this is an incredible country that gives incredible opportunities. And but it's not easy, it's not black or white. Those three legs of the stool is the investor has to change their mentality. We want to give back to the community, so that return is not going to be 15%, it's going to be 8%. And as long as it's a decent return, people are actually, they said, okay, I'm giving back to the community and it's a decent return because, Quinn, I have a responsibility to my heirs and to the kids and the grandkids, to the shareholders. So that adjusts that conversation. And it doesn't have to be Manhattan. It can be here in South Carolina. The second component, which is why this makes sense, is the local municipalities. If anyone in here is a local municipality, I'll give the worst case scenario, California. And Mark and I were just talking about it. He was saying that there was a community here in South Carolina who's, you've got to step up and participate in the conversation. And that city was willing to put some dollars in putting sewer and septic systems in place so that other projects can survive. I heard that and I thought, thank you. Because if the investors are going to shrink back some of their returns, and a city can step in and provide some type of subsidy, Senator Scott explained the TIF fee, well then that's where the language has turned. A couple years ago, I would go into a city meeting and sometimes they'd say, Quinn, we love that you guys are here. Here are our drawings. We want the Taj Mahal for the homeless. And I said, I'd love to do it. I can't make that make sense. You don't get the decent return. Now, you have municipalities who are actually participating in that conversation and being more reasonable because they realize they have to compete against 8,700 other census tracts. How do we attract them to our community? California, we have a project right now, and the environmental permitting process could take over 10 years. And I thought, you guys aren't even making this. I mean, we blow the whole incentive. So when you have a municipality, a local, someone like Senator Scott and the local communities and cities and mayors around here who say, what can make this work? Can we sit down and be transparent and spread this project and find out how we can layer this? The third layer, and why I call it the third leg of the stool, and I know Cory hit on it earlier, is the non-profit. Critically important. Something I tell my team all the time is do not, create a square peg and try to fit it into a round hole. Those who work and live in that community know what they need. We do not need, the four seasons in all communities. We do not, what do we need? We need housing, What kind of housing? 1 bedrooms? 3 bedrooms? Are there mothers with children? Which areas? You know, out there, or is it off the freeway that allows people to actually get to jobs on time and not have to pay for childcare? So these are critical pieces, and the nonprofits, they know their community. They know it. They know where people need to live. They know what families need. They know what where single moms need to live. They know where is it safe. They know where kids can come home and walk to and home from school. Local churches, they know their communities. So it's important. So for us right now, we have an incredible project right now that we're working with Chicanos por la Causa. They're one of the largest Hispanic nonprofits in the country and building, and we've layered it. We've worked with the city where we come in with investors who are more reasonable on the return. The local city is stepping in and waiving some of the developmental impact fees in order for us to provide workforce and affordable housing for this community, which needs it. It's a lot that has been vacant for years. And Chicanos por la Causa, their mission is to provide for this community, and they've stepped in with some equity as well in order to meet this. And why is this critical? Why is this collaboration that John talked about from EIG, why is this important? Because as an investor, if I'm investing in a neighborhood that hasn't been developed before, I get this question all the time. Quinn, if it never made sense before, why is it making sense now? Like, you know, if we couldn't build there before, why can it pencil out now? And I'll tell you the reason why is I said because it's all about mitigating risk. That nonprofit, Chicanos por la Causa, that neighborhood, there's a hotel down the street where they rent rooms out by the hour. There's prostitution going on there. And it breaks my heart. And Chicanos por la Causa has stepped in, purchased it, and cleaned it out so that we don't have that up the street. There is a mobile home park up the street where kids are jump roping, where electrical lines are coming up from the ground. And the community is a little nervous about the city coming in because there's been some strife and tension previously, so they don't feel comfortable, but they know Chicanos por la Causa. They've been there for 50 years. So they've allowed them to come in and bury those lines and work with them. Now you've created a community, and again, hitting on what John, it has to be sustainable because this has to work for 10 years. So that relationship, so the communities we go into, the Southeast, the Southwest, the Sun Belt, are communities who have shown that they want to be a part of that conversation. There's also, if you're in development, you also know that we're always mitigating risk. There's acts of God. There's certain areas that are weather delays. I mean, I'll just give you, in Canada, there's only a very small window of time that we can develop our properties in Canada. So with the weather that we have here, makes it much more easy because it's all about execution. You want to make sure you execute that property, you get it built, you get it open, you get it stabilized, and you're actually giving back to the community. So that's a key piece on why the areas, acts of God, labor, there's an incredible talented labor pool here that makes it easy for us to staff up, and material shortages, issues, acts of God, weather, and just the, not only the nonprofit community, but also the municipalities. That collaboration which allows our projects here to get done on time, on budget, and giving back to the community. So,
great, thank you.
Long answer, Cory, but there's a lot of different components.
That's great,
yeah,
absolutely, I understand that for sure. You hit on a lot of the social impact of the program and what the intent is ultimately of this program from a social perspective. And we know that this next question is for anyone here. We all know that the social impact reporting is not required, as the senator mentioned earlier today. Despite it not being required, do you guys plan on your funds having social impact reporting?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm working on this. I know Shay might be still in the, and I've been working, I know I've shared it with the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times and recently, and I know I get a chance to give some feedback to the teams in DC. For us, I know we can't change the world in our projects, a little piece at a time. During the last, when we had stimulus money coming in from the federal government in the early 2000s, what I saw were jobs created, but there was no pathway. I mean, there was a job that was really to sweep, and that would count as a job created. And that was a little heartbreaking to see. So this time around, when we saw the opportunity zone, we followed the legislation that was coming through in 2017, we jumped on board. We actually built out our own metrics that we want to, all of our projects have to meet our metrics. So on our hospitality, we actually manage, we have 3,000 employees here in the US, over 140 hotel properties across 31 states. And what we found, and over the years, we found that the type of people you see coming in at front desk and housekeeping, they were hardworking, and there's an incredible talent pool there, but not all of them were fortunate enough to have gone off to college. And we found many of them found themselves in dead-end jobs. So we created an extensive training program because people need to have hope. They need to be able to go home and tell their family what they do and be proud of it. So not only do we need to create jobs, so when we measure on our hospitality and our workforce development component, we measure number of jobs, we measure quality of jobs, so we measure salaries to make sure that it is a living wage and there's an opportunity. And lastly, we measure pathway to the middle class. People have to have a road to the middle class. They need to be able to go home and tell their families and their kids, I'm proud of what I do. Over 50% of our management is groomed from within. And I tell our shareholders, it is unbelievable. What is good, being a good neighbor is good business. In a hotel, did you know that if that water main breaks at 3 a.m., they're not going to be able to reach me. And you need someone who's actually needed to be there at least 3 years to solve that problem seamlessly. You know, our retention rate is, in the industry and hospitality, the turnover rate is 71%. Our turnover rate is 24%. It matters. And it hits, and that allows that, it benefits the investors. But what it does also is, we've got to measure, again, on workforce development, number of jobs, quality of jobs, and there's got to be a training that employers need to provide so that people can move from housekeeping to supervisor, to manager, to general manager, to regional manager. On the housing component, we're not, luxury housings are beautiful. There's not very much social impact, so we've focused no luxury homes, at least on our projects, entry-level workforce housing and affordable housing and ELI, trying to reach down into the economic stack to the extremely low income. And the only way we have been able to successfully do that is by the 3 legs of the stool. We open full conversations with cities and municipalities and say, look, 10%, 25% of these need to be for affordable housing. That means the rent costs. It's actually, it's not rocket science. You sit down and you say, I can only charge $500 or $400 for this room. This is what can I save on the permitting side or the subsidy, city subsidy side? The nonprofit, what other components? If you can, as a nonprofit, if you're credit counseling, our Chicanos por la Causa, they do an amazing credit counseling program that ensures that our tenants, we have 100% occupancy and they don't miss their rent payment. And for an investor, that's risk mitigation. Right. So for us, that component, those 2 measurements, number of units, on housing it's a little easier to measure, just how many units and how much farther down into the economic stack you can reach.
Great, thank you. So it sounds like, and we heard it here, that all 3 fund managers stated that they'll be reporting the social impact of their funds investments, and I think it's a great example for other fund managers out there, and hopefully you know, that social impact reporting, although not required, will snowball and all funds will do that. So we are out of time at this point, so we will wrap up this panel discussion. I'm sure it'll be available throughout the day to answer any further questions. Thank you.
Thank you.